Okay, to introduce Lo, I'm just gonna read what I've got here. So, beautiful Lo is a mama on a mission to cultivate a more joyful parenting experience. Raised by emotionally and physically distant parents, she's doing the work of reparenting herself and staying present with her children. With mistakes and grace, she is fostering more kindness and ease in her parenting journey as she helps her kiddos and her inner child rediscover themselves every day. Lo is going to help us sift through common misconceptions of modern parenting and navigate small shifts to reparent ourselves and respectfully raise emotionally intelligent children. All right, Lo, take it away.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for being here in person and Zoom. And yes, while I am here and have been deemed an expert, I want to start by saying I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. And so we're all just here doing our best. And that is true for me as well. As Joanna mentioned, Hive is all about parenting in many forms. And this is one of those routes, and it's kind of an umbrella of a lot of different things. And it will look different for absolutely everyone and even every child. I don't remember who said it, but long ago, early in my parenting journey, I heard parent your children the same by parenting them differently. And so that means knowing who each child is, knowing their love language or their interests or whatever it might be, and tailoring your parenting to that. And so it will look different between child and family, but that is okay. That is kind of the whole point of why we're here. Just like our friendships look different depending upon who we're with. So all that to say, we're all doing our best, and you might learn a new way or a different way to experience parenting or implement parenting, and take what feels good and leave the rest. And with that as well, if you do feel triggered by something that probably is bringing up something from your inner child, from your past, acknowledge that and validate that. And I strongly encourage you to find the courage to do that work and heal that so that it ends with you and it doesn't get passed on to future generations. All right, so I have some old school notes with me. Let's see. Okay. So what is gentle parenting? Well, it comes with many different names. I've heard gentle parenting, natural parenting, positive parenting, conscious parenting, attachment parenting. There's so many different things, and they all sort of mean the same thing, yet are different. And it just kind of depends on who is giving that information and how they define it. I think it's completely a personal journey. So it depends on what feels right and good for you. And your definition will be different than the person sitting next to you, and that's okay. For me, it is trying to parent with empathy, trying to parent with responsiveness, responding to physical needs as well as emotional and mental needs, and respecting that children are people. Sadly, we've gotten into a weird kind of mix in society where there's childism. So we degrade or downplay the feelings and thoughts of a child simply because they're a child. And that's really not okay. That's not why we're here. We are all human and we're all equal on some level, and we all have different interests. And so it's trying to acknowledge and validate children, how they're showing up, and help them work through that instead of just putting up a wall and shutting them out to navigate something that is being expressed differently than an adult might express it. And then, well, that was my next thought, was validating feelings. That's a big part of it for me. Personally, growing up, I was raised by emotionally and physically distant parents, and that was what I needed to walk this journey. So it's not to say they're at fault, they're why I'm the way I am, or whatever, good, bad, or indifferent. It's just my journey. And for me, what I remember most thinking about emotions as a child is growing up and feeling big emotions and then being sent away to my room. My parents were not emotionally literate people. And so I was never given the chance to walk through those emotions, to let them rise, crest, and fall. It was just rise and shove it all down. And at some point that's going to blow and that's going to burst. And I had to navigate that alone. And that again is just part of my journey. So I'm no expert globally. I'm not a researcher or an educator on gentle parenting. I am just someone who has walked the path and is starting to see it from both sides. So this is just my experience and the information I've gained from others and kind of filtered through my experience. So some things that we often forget as parents that can be really difficult from the child's perspective. One thing that's huge is time. For us, we often say, I'll be there in just a minute. Well, a minute could mean a second, a true minute, an hour, 30 minutes. That's really hard for a child. They don't know that this time you're saying I'll be there in just a minute really means a minute versus this next time you say just a minute means 30 minutes. And they also don't really have a concept of time. There are some cultures that don't use time. It is truly man-made, right? Like we have decided that 24 hours are in a day. Well, to a child, what's an hour? Well, it's however long it takes to get from this point to that point, or it's as long as this show or whatever. It's harder for them to integrate that. So one thing that I like to try and do is, especially if we're trying to like leave a park, instead of we need to leave in 2 minutes, you can say that, but then also translate it for them. So we need to get going in 2 minutes. That looks like being able to go down the slide 2 more times or climb the monkey bars 2 more times or something. Like translate it into kid speak so that they know, okay, I have the opportunity to do 2 more things here and I'm going to choose wisely instead of someone just told me that I have to go at some point, but I don't really know when it is. So I'm going to just keep playing and then they're going to tell me when it's time to go. And then at that moment, I'm going to realize that I haven't played on all the other things I want to play on and it's going to, so trying to navigate that and preempt that and translate it into a way that they understand. Something else that I thought was really interesting is for 3-year-olds, 1 year is a third of their life. So 33-ish% of their life. For a 35-year-old, 1 year is less than 3% of their life. So when you tell a child, we're gonna get to grandma's house and it's gonna take 20 minutes, to us who have lived many minutes, that seems like nothing because maybe we've been on an 8-hour road trip or 8-hour plane ride or whatever. To a child, that is an eternity. So if we're telling them, especially when it comes to emotions or I need a minute or something, if we're telling them there's this huge undeterminable amount of time, to us it might seem totally reasonable and it may truly be, but in the child's interpretation, that might seem so overwhelming. And then that's another trigger point of this person isn't here for me forever. And that's really hard to process. So just something to consider whenever we talk about time. We talked about this a little bit as well as perspective. It's very easy as humans and parents to say what we don't want to happen. And then the kid hears what you don't want to happen. And then they keep doing what you don't want to happen. So trying to reframe. So what I mean by that is we're in the library and they're using a really loud voice. It's don't yell. They heard yell. So their brain is just processing yell, as opposed to what we could say is let's use quiet voices. And then that helps them say, okay, quiet voices. What does that mean? Okay, I need to lower my voice. Got it. And they can start to process a little bit better. Don't hit your brother. Hit is what they hear. Whereas you could say, let's use gentle hands. Or if they have a lot of energy, it's you can go outside and kick the ball or something like that. Give them another option. Try and channel what they're trying to do into a different avenue. And that happens with how we talk about our day as well. We're very good at saying, I didn't like this, that didn't go well. Whatever it is, we kind of have this negativity bias. And well, we do, it's not a kind of, we do as humans have a negativity bias. It's what's kept us alive. So trying to consciously tune into that and change it in how we speak just in regular adult conversations is really powerful too, because that's what your brain then hears. So if you can shift it to something more positive, then you're just setting yourself up for more ease and success later on. All right, saying versus doing. So I have a very light bulb moment in my own experience. my daughter and I would walk and she would bike on a Strider bike in our neighborhood. And I would always say, stop at the end of the street and look both ways for cars. And I have said that all the time. And time after time again, she would just blow right through and keep going. And then when we were in the wagon, I would look both ways for cars and then keep going. But what I realized was I never stopped my body. I was always looking for cars as I was approaching the intersection, so that by the time I got to the intersection, I knew there weren't any cars and it was safe to cross. What my daughter saw me doing was just continuing to walk. So she would continue to walk or continue to ride. So then I had this light bulb moment of, oh, I've been telling her stop and look, yet I haven't been doing that visually for her. And so then I started thinking through what are other times where I'm doing that in my world, where I'm saying something, but I'm not doing it in a way that she sees. And so just something to bring awareness to. All good?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry, no worries. All right. So something where we often find some discord is children are very good at being present and being, whereas adults are better at doing. And so that can cause trouble sometimes, where you have a child who is just fully immersed in what they're doing and a parent who's looking at the clock saying, we got to go do this thing. We need to leave. We need to whatever. And the child is just being present. And so trying to be aware of that. Children are a beautiful opportunity for us to tap back into our own childlike behavior in a very good way and forget about the adult world and have fun and get dirty and get outside and just really enjoy life. And sometimes we try to put a wall between us and them, saying like, well, they get to be carefree because they're young. I have to deal with all this stuff. And children are really an invitation to not deal with all this stuff, to focus on them and be present. And that's really all they want. And that's kind of the whole premise of gentle parenting, is just presence. That is the most important gift that we can give our children. And then parenting is a two-way street. Children are our mirrors. So when they do something that is super triggering to us, just know that there has been a time where you have done that to them or to someone else as well. Come on in. So yes, so they are here. I like to think of it as, I don't own one, but when I travel, sometimes there are those like super zoom mirrors in the bathroom where it's like, you can see like this tiny dot on your face is like the size of your head. To me, that's what a child is. They will find that tiny imperfection and just expand it for you to like really see and acknowledge and immerse yourself in. And that can be really scary as adults. And that's where the reparenting part comes in. Is it's easy, that's not the right word. It's common for adults to put up that wall and not want to go there, but it's such a blessing if we do, if we can acknowledge our faults, if we can zoom in to that really ugly part of us and just sit with it and acknowledge it and validate it and maybe ask it its story or where it came from, how it got there. And then that will help us heal it and therefore not pass it on. There's a pretty awesome researcher who has helped create and define attachment theory. And where was I going with this? I don't know. We'll get back to it.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely. Please
So
do.
say you were that whole description. Could you
Yeah.
give an example? Like, that's kind of one of my questions I was already going to ask you,
Yeah.
but since you're on the topic, could you give an example of something as a trigger to you? That's like the big thing you're pointing out, and then what you're doing in that moment.
Yes. Thank you for asking. So for me, it's the biggest trigger I'm working on right now is sitting with emotion. Like I was saying at the beginning, I was not able to healthily express emotion as a child. It wasn't, my parents didn't feel good about it. So when I felt something big, it was go to your room, stop crying, don't do that, whatever. It was just shut down. And so now when my children are experiencing a big emotion, I can be very good at showing up for them initially, but if it continues on through a time that my adult brain says is illogical, like you should be over that. It's not a big deal, right? Well, to them, it's a huge deal. And I struggle with that. And so then in those moments, I try my best. And again, I'm not perfect, but I try to take a breath, to feel what is happening in my body, to focus on my senses, something that brings me down to the moment. We often, it's a trauma response, right? So some of us dissociate, some of us do other healing methods that aren't very healthy to try and get us out from feeling that trauma response. And so it's trying to undo those and also tell yourself you're in a safe space. And so for me, it's senses. It's also talking my daughter through the steps. So it sounds like you're feeling frustrated. It's okay to feel frustrated. Where do you feel it in your body? Or even not even naming the emotion and asking her, what do you think you're feeling right now? It sounds like you're feeling something. Can you name it? And trying to see if she can put a name to the emotion, and then asking, what do you want to do with that? And that allows the emotion to be there. And then it also allows a way out of it. And so frustration is a common one in my house right now. So then we say, do you want to push the wall? Do you want to take a deep breath? Do you want to listen to music? Do you want to jump or dance it out? Do you want to get outside? Do you want a hug? Do you want, some children really just need like that compression, like I think it's like a thunder sock for dogs, like a thunder vest where it's just like a huge hug or like a weighted blanket. Do you want a massage? Do you want someone like touching your body? So that can help your brain tune back into your body. So there are a bunch of different ways, and they're not all going to work, and a different one might work at a different time. So it's kind of just figuring that out and trying to regulate yourself so you can help regulate your child. And that's probably the hardest part, is if you're getting triggered. Yeah. Then, and the first step is awareness, and then show up with grace. So don't judge yourself, because that's often what we do, especially as women in society. It's, I'm not supposed to feel these things. And it's really interesting too, because as people who identify as women, it's typically anger that's not okay. And as people who typically, or who identify as male, it's typically sadness that's not okay. So we often shut down the tears for young boys and shut down the aggression for young girls. And that's then what typically reappears. And then I also have a friend who says that anger is the mask that sadness wears. So typically anger has something sad a few steps below it. And so you can, when you get out of the charged scenario, you can ask yourself, what was that? What was I feeling? Why did I feel that? I'm remembering now what I was going to say earlier. So Dan Siegel talks about this, and he says, it's not what happened to you that matters. It's how you make sense of it. And so giving yourself that time to make sense of what happened will then, I really want to say, heal you of it. And it will, it just might not in that moment. It might take time. But if you keep showing up, if you keep giving yourself that space, it won't control you. And I think that's such a beautiful gift that we can give to our children too. They don't know what this stuff is in their body. They are feeling anger, and they might not have the words for it. They might have never felt this before or to this degree before, and it might be really scary. And a lot of times it's triggering for parents. So they put up the wall and say, don't do that, stop crying, go to your room. You're going to lose Nintendo. It's probably not even a thing anymore or whatever. Totally tapping in my childhood. That was my brother. Anyway, there'll be a punishment or something. And it's really the parent tapping into fight or flight of, I need to shut this down. Like, this is really scary for me, so I need to jump in and stop it. And so if we can try and lengthen the space between the stimulus and the reaction, then that gives us the opportunity to sit with that and then help our kid sit with that as well. And emotions only last 60 to 90 seconds in the body. So that's it. If we can sit with that for 60 to 90 seconds and let it express fully, it will release. It's when we stop it that we store it. And then it keeps coming up minute after minute, day after day, year after year. And then the problem just continues and escalates. And then the double whammy to that is whenever something happens that's similar to that, you get this whole new set of emotions, and it brings up and it links to all the other ones that have happened before. So then it just becomes even more enormous. So yeah, it's a lot. But if we're all in this together, we can do it. So, all right, thank you for that question. And I want to check the time real quick. Awesome. Okay. So some modern misconceptions about parenting, and these may surprise you, they may trigger you, or they might just be like, yep, totally get that. Any response is valid and welcome. And again, no, actually, all of these are research backed, but it will take time to change parenting, right? Like we're used to what we've been doing, and typically that comes from what we've been taught. And this might highlight an opportunity to shift. It might highlight many opportunities to shift, and that's okay. My recommendation is, instead of that being overwhelming, let that be empowering, and just pick one and start there and see where it goes. You don't have to change overnight. Again, there's no perfect parent. So something that happens all the time is praise. We think that praise is a really good thing. We think that we should be praising children and motivating and encouraging them in that way. But actually, praise is often received as a form of control, a form of judgment, or it can take the joy away from the children. It's us telling them, this is good because I see it as good, and I don't care how you see it. I know that probably might land really harsh, and I don't. Well, it is what it is. I had someone who was so caught in saying good job, and she didn't realize it until we had this conversation. But my child, we were playing at her house. My child, who was like 8 months at the time, made a noise, like just a high pitched noise. And her immediate reaction, without skipping a beat, was good squeak. I was like, whoa, like, okay, we are literally praising everything. Like, he just made a noise, and that was the response. And so oftentimes we don't see this, but there is a difference between evaluation and encouragement. And the praise often comes as evaluation as opposed to encouragement. So what could encouragement look like? It could be, you did it. It could be, thank you for helping me. It could be saying what you see. So you climbed that ladder, or that you did the monkey bars. Instead of good job, associating good, therefore the child hears, this is good, which means I could also be bad, so I need to find ways to keep being good. Then it's just, you accomplished this, done. Or you don't have to say anything. Again, back to the presence piece, our presence is the most important piece of parenting. So if you are just there and sharing in the excitement and the joy of what your child is experiencing, that's going to mean more to them than any praise ever would. Something else that is similar is rewarding or punishments. I do want to read a quote from Alfie Kohn. So he says, it is no less controlling to offer goodies for a desired behavior than to threaten sanctions for its absence. So that to say, we all have our own opinion and style with punishment, but many people think that rewards are still beneficial, but really it's two sides of the same coin. We're trying to control or manipulate behavior. And punishment, according to Alfie Kohn, will only lead to calculation of risks. So how can I do this when my parents won't find out next time? Blind conformity, just giving up your own thoughts and opinion and just doing what an authority figure tells you to do, or revolt. And personally, I don't want to raise a child who has to choose between those three things or navigate that. And so an option there is connecting. So coming back to the presence. There's another quote that I can share in a follow-up that I don't have here, but it talks about how the cooperation from a child is directly connected to the connection we feel with their parent. So if they're willing to cooperate with you, it's because they feel connected to you. If you feel like you're battling your child every day on one specific thing or many specific things, there's probably a lack of connection there. If it's your toddler doesn't want to get dressed and it's become this huge battle, maybe it's because a month ago, a day ago, I don't know when ago, they really needed help with their socks and they were really frustrated and they couldn't get it on and they didn't have the words to express that to you and you were in a hurry, so you just said, I'm going to do it for you, put it on, and you left. There could be something there where they didn't feel seen, felt, or heard, and we're completely oblivious to it. But for them, it's so real. And then it just escalates from there. And then the way that their body processes it is getting dressed is hard. I can't do it. And then it just becomes this big, like, lump sum feeling. So trying to pause, trying to connect. I always say connect and then correct. So if there's behavior that you don't like, try and connect to them. The behavior is an expression of a feeling or a missed feeling. And it's not that the behavior is the issue, it's the underlying component that led to the behavior that needs to be addressed. So another quote that I can share is, if someone, like a toddler, hit a friend, we should be more concerned about what led them to feel the thing that they felt that caused them to hit, as opposed to the hit. So there's always something underneath that. And when we get down to that, it's often heartbreaking and also typically easy to remedy through just a simple connection. But most of us, again, how we were parented or how we see other people parenting, we typically put up that wall of this is not okay. And we try to correct the what instead of getting to the why. Yes.
So I have a very strong-willed child.
Okay.
Who, it's not just with us that she doesn't follow. She's not great at following direction. And so it's like 3, 4, 5 times to be like, we got to get our pajamas on, we got to pick a book. And it's always just kind of this like la-di-da situation. But that's at school, that's at soccer, it's like everywhere. So I hear you saying, like, when there's some challenge that it's for lack of connection, but like if it's so widespread and it's not just like in our household, so then it's like the threatening of like, all right, well, if you can't get your pajamas on, we're not going to have time for books. So it's, it kind of follows that track. But again, it's something that we have been told by basically every coach, teacher, and person that she's encountered, that she's just like she's doing her own thing and she's totally fine with that. So what is your thought on that?
So I will say I am not a therapist or one to claim to know it all. You might want to do something as a family and try and navigate that together further with someone who can like walk the path with you a little bit. Something that comes to mind first is congratulations for having a strong-willed child. I know it's hard right now, but strong-willed children are truly the leaders of our future. So she might be the one who changes the world for us in some way. And so I would encourage you to find what does work for her. Like, where is she motivated? What does she love to do or to experience? And how can you tap into that more and build the connection there? And then see if that connection and that bond from something that she already knows and loves can then filter out to those sticking points, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of starting with what is working. And another thing, which this is a whole different subject, but law of attraction is what we focus on is what continues to be. And so if we keep seeing our children how they are right now, we're kind of limiting them. So try and see her in her highest, most best, wise, amazing self, and then try to be the parent to that person and let her rise up with you. So it's kind of like, see her how you know she can be, raise yourself up to that, and then let her come with you. And with that being said, it's not meant to be a control thing. She still needs to have her autonomy and feel like she is empowered to make all these decisions. So with the pajamas, maybe it's asking if she does need any help. Like, this, are you struggling with this? Can I support you in some way? Do you want me to just be here next to you while you do this? Or something where she feels like you're a teammate instead of more above. looking down. That was kind of like 4 or 5 different things all wrapped into one. I hope one of them landed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question, like relating to your example though. So say it's like, okay, but we need her to put on her pajamas. There's not going to be time to read a book, but you don't want not reading a book to be a punishment, but you're also saying you don't want to give rewards for certain behavior because it's like Pavlov's dogs and it's not going to be innate.
Yeah.
She's just gonna be like, oh, I know I get a reward. So does that mean you would phrase it as like, not reading a book tonight is not a punishment. It's just our time's up. So when we get to 7, we don't read books. That's not like, do you know what I'm saying? Where it's just like,
Yeah.
that is what it is each night. Like by 7 is bedtime. So if there's not time for a book, there's just not time for a book. You did nothing wrong.
There could be, yes. So you're kind of tapping into something that is starting to be called natural consequences. So I like to associate it with the train because trains are leaving. So it's like, if we don't get to the train station by this time, the train will go and we'll miss it. And if we stay and play here at the park and we don't make it to the train station, the train will be gone. That's a natural consequence. So you can explain it that way. It depends on the parenting style you're coming from, because if you are coming from a punishment reward background, the child might have a hard time to differentiate that and not really see that. They might see it still as like authority, as opposed to I'm with you on this. And so then I think it just comes down to being a real human, like being side by side with them. I know you like to read this book and I want to have time to read this book as well. So how can I help you with your pajamas? Or maybe it's as simple as they don't like this style of pajama and there's a better one that they do want. Like you can get kind of funky with how you address the problem, because the problem might not be, I don't want to get dressed. It's, I don't want to wear this thing, or I don't like when something is coming over my face. So maybe they need something that buttons in front. Like it could be so many different things, and it's just presenting in one form. So it's trying to play detective and letting them join in on that process. They know. They might not have the words for it, but trying to help them find that and showing them, I'm here for you and I want to figure this out with you. We all want it to be a win for everyone. So, does that feel a little bit better maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. And for you as well? Okay. And we can chat more if you want to as well. Okay. So something else that is very common, especially with younger kids, is sharing and forced sharing. That is not something that's common in adult life, yet we expect children to be able to do it. So if someone comes up and says, I want that toy, then we often tell our kids, oh, let's share, let's give that person that toy. But if your friend comes up to you and says, I want to borrow your car, it's not always as easy as here you go. It's often, okay, well, let me think through this day. And yes, I want you to have my car, but it has to be mutually beneficial, right? Like I have to get where I'm going when I need to get there. And then I also want to help you get to where you're going. So trying to bring that mentality in with children as well is maybe you just acknowledge to your child, it looks like Jimmy would like to play with that doll. When you're finished with it, can you give it to him? Or do you think there's a way that both of you could play together? Do you even want to play together? There are many different things instead of just give him your doll, he wants it. And that tells the child Jimmy's needs matter more than mine, which is not what we're trying to do, but often what we're communicating. So just allowing a little bit of more wiggle room there. We've talked a little bit about emotions. Let me see, I think I've shared all that I want to share about that. I guess one other thing is, I think, again, this is one of my hardest parts of parenting is when my children are feeling emotions. I try to share my calm instead of joining their chaos. And easier said than done. And again, for me, with the longevity of emotions, it's then easier for me to lose that ability. But that is always my goal. And when I don't maintain my calm and I do join in the chaos, then I always try to loop around and repair. So that looks like apologizing. Many parents don't apologize, and I think we all should. We all make mistakes. And if you can show that to your child, first of all, they're more likely to apologize when the time is right. but then also they see you as a human and they love you and you make a mistake. And that is such a beautiful gift. Then they can see unconditional love playing itself out. And you kind of lose the pedestal, which is a good thing. You join them down on their mistake making, we're all learning together level. Something else that we often say is, especially with younger kids when they fall, it's you're okay, you're okay. My recommendation is switch that to a question. Are you okay? We don't know. They might have just had a very traumatic experience, and we need to give space to allow that. Again, let the emotion rise, crest, and fall instead of just shutting it out. You're okay, we're done. And it's okay if you've said that. we probably all have, but just bringing awareness to that. Trying to help them name emotions is really big as well. And then sometimes you just need to sit with them. Parents and people in general like to do. Sometimes all a child needs is just you to be there. And you can say, like, you can even ask, do you want to be alone right now? Or do you want me here? And they might say, I want you here. And then you just sit there. It might be silent, who knows? Or if they say, I want to be alone, then you could say, okay, I will go be in the kitchen. I'll be close by. I'm here when you need me. Or do you want me to check back in 5 minutes? Or something like that, where you're not just gone, you're still there, because they're still very in it. And you can be in it adjacent, if that makes sense. So still tuned in with them. Let me check what time again. We might just speed roll through some of these. Okay, so with control, one of the biggest things children need is control over their own life. And we often take that away, and we've talked about a few different ways that we do that and how we can shift. But a few more, food is one of them. I was raised as part of the Happy Plate Club, so I had to finish my plate. I did not put the food on my own plate, yet I was responsible for eating all of it. And that's really tough for children. And I can go into a whole long speech about that. But just honoring their body, instead of when they're done and you think they should eat more, instead of saying, can you eat 2 more bites? Just trusting their body, just saying, okay, you know your body best, or would you like your plate to be up on the counter and available for you later, or something else where you're not shutting food out, you're not using food as a reward or a punishment. It is a standard need of life, and children need to have safety and security in that, and also know how to trust their body and their hunger and fullness cues. Something else is affection. Give grandma a hug, give me a kiss goodbye. It's the child's body, so it's their choice. And that could look like, if grandma says, oh, sweetie, give me a kiss, then you can step in and help your child, especially if they're younger and don't yet have this voice, to just say, it looks like grandma's leaving and would like a kiss. You're welcome to give her one, but you don't have to. It's your body, it's your choice. And you can say that as young as an infant. And I think infants is kind of the hardest, because people think they can just do whatever they want to a baby because they're so dang cute. But that is still a human in that body. That is a soul and a spirit, and they have their own desires and needs and wants. And it might not be someone pulling their pinky toe. So tapping into that and respecting that boundary for your kids. Responsibility for emotion. So trying not to say something like, it makes me sad when you do that, or I get so upset when you do this, because that tells your kid that they and their actions create and are responsible for you and your emotions. And that is just a whole tangled mess that would be beautiful to untwine and separate. If someone is hitting you, instead of saying like, it makes me mad if you hit me, then I won't let you hit me. I want to feel safe in my body, so I'm going to put you down, but I'm here and I'm listening. So it's still like, you must be upset to do that. And I want to acknowledge that, why, that emotion behind the behavior, yet also setting the boundary of that behavior is not okay for me. And so I'm not just going to sit here and take it. And that is okay. That is a loving way to set that boundary.
A question on that.
Yes.
So I feel like that is super easy. Well, that's not the right word. I think conceptually, it's really easy to picture what that looks like when children have not yet developed empathy and shame. I think those two are like the flip sides of the same coin. But I think once they have developed empathy, I think that I think that explaining like that hurt my feelings, what you just said, or like you're hurting my body. I do think that that's appropriate, but every time it comes out of my mouth, I think you're creating a codependent relationship. And I'm like, this is not good, but I don't know. Like I feel like there's a little bit of a struggle between like, I want you to feel empathy. I don't want you to feel shame. You didn't know better, but I know you can feel better. So I say things like, how would you feel if I had done that to you? Would it make you feel happy or sad? But then like, also I'm very quick to say like, that's hurting me, stop. Like, and you're responsible for stopping, and you're old enough now to know. And I think also like, parenting into older years, like beyond the toddlerhood when they don't have that emotional range, I think that becomes that's a big one that I haven't quite worked through yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally respect that. And I'm grateful you raised a point. The first thing that comes to mind is you can reframe it as a question of, can you imagine how I feel? Or can you imagine how that would feel if it happened to you? So then they go back into their body. And so it's still like you are feeling, so a child hits you and that's not okay. And that upsets you. Then you can, hold their hand. I won't let you hit me. Can you imagine how that feels? Instead of, do you think that feels good or bad or happy or however, like naming it, because that's a really hard question to answer. Because it's like, do you think that feels good? No, but do they want to admit that in this scenario? Also no. So then trying to reframe it to, can you imagine? Because yes, they can imagine. It might not be something they want to imagine, but they can. And then that helps get their wheels turning too, to help them make the connections and then make different choices in the future. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. I totally agree with acknowledging emotion. And I think you can name your emotion. So that hurt me. I feel sad. Let me think through this one a little bit more.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Perfect. Please
And then
do.
we can work through it.
Okay,
Sometimes
awesome.
it's easier if it's concrete.
Absolutely.
Okay, so tonight my husband was stung by a bee. And my husband is a beekeeper, so he gets stung somewhat frequently, but he wasn't following one of the rules, and that's why he got stung by the bee. And my husband was already like in his own place of like, oh my gosh, I just got stung on the face. Like, what am I going to look like in the morning? And then my son, is also like, you just got stung on the face. What are you going to look like in the morning? And he was like, you didn't follow the rules, Dad. And my husband was, like, I can't listen to you discipline me, which is totally fair. And I need a minute and walk away, which is fair. But then so then my opportunity is to parent in that moment because I'm the one that is emotionally regulated and I'm fine. And so when I come in and I say like, hey buddy, did you see how what you said made Dad feel bad? Why do you think it made him feel that way? Well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, you just made a mistake. He had just made a mistake and fallen and done it the wrong way. And I said, how would it have felt if I had done that? And then but even that, I'm like, that feels like I'm creating a codependent relationship. Like in a way, he probably should be allowed to say like, you didn't follow the rules. My husband should be able to say like, you're right, I didn't follow the rules. But there's a time and a place to say that. So I guess my question is like, as we're navigating teaching empathy to our children, and to ourselves, like how do we work through like teaching timing and teaching like the appropriateness and like sometimes you don't say all of the words that are in your head. That's also a skill and like something that is fine to say too. But I think there's like, I just haven't quite figured out how to navigate that.
And I will say, I think you're doing a beautiful job and it's okay to be messy through parenthood. I think by modeling it. So you could check in with your husband, like after your kiddo makes a comment that is triggering for him. If he had stuck around, maybe you could have said, how are you feeling? Like, what is going on in your world? Like how can I help? I'm listening. I'm here. Some of the same things that you could say to a child, you can say to an adult, and letting your son see that as well. I think there's kind of no right answer, and it's not something that's taught overnight. It's something that it is experienced literally through a lifetime. So I would say the fact that you're worried about creating a codependent relationship probably means you're doing a darn good job in that. You're at least aware of it. So just keep that awareness and keep trying, and circle back. And you can ask your son or your husband in front of your son, like, how did you feel in that moment? And try and bring more words to it. Oh, yes.
Tell me if this is totally off base, but this kind of reminds me, I don't know if you follow Dr. Becky at Good Inside. And this reminds me of, she had a podcast episode, not related to this at all. It was actually about, she had someone on and they were talking about fat people and how, and it's like, the word fat is not shameful. It's an observation. And we as adults are the ones that put the shame on it when we say, don't say that. So my first thought is that your son did nothing wrong. He completely observed exactly what happened and just stated it. And what's so interesting is that we usually praise our kids because we want them to observe those things. But like you said, the timing was not great because obviously dad's really upset. But it reminds me of this podcast episode because she talks about how, say you're in a grocery store and your kid says, oh my God, that guy's so fat. And as a parent, you don't want to make fat shameful. So you say, you're right. Great observation. He does have a big belly. Some people don't like to be talked about in public, so we can talk about that later. So taking the shame part away. So it just makes me think, again, totally different scenario, but wow, you're right. He did get stung by a bee and he didn't follow the rules. But you know what? Right now, dad's a little upset. So we'll talk about this later. That could be completely wrong.
No.
I'm not the expert, but I don't know, something about that kind of triggered that for me of like, he was just observing like a 5-year-old does.
Totally.
But of course dad's upset. If I was dad, I'd be like, thanks for rubbing salt in the wound.
Yeah.
But as a 5-year-old, does he get that? But you want to teach him.
That's my job.
I know, exactly. Yeah. That's tough. Sorry.
And I think that's part of it. And I think I love that comparison actually, because I think that is true. It is an observation. And I was going to say this before, but I didn't want to, but now I feel empowered to. I think your husband was also triggered because that mirror aspect of 5-year-old telling you did something wrong, like that hurts on some level, especially when it's
definitely.
true.
Yeah.
Yes. So so that might be him feeling something, and it might be attached to something from his childhood. I don't know, but then him taking that space, I think, is a beautiful gift to himself. And then I would just encourage him at some point when he is feeling regulated and okay to come back and have that conversation with your son as well of, this is how I felt. And you don't have to go into my parents did this and, all of the big adult stuff, but you can just say like, I felt this way, so I needed to step away. And it can be as simple as that, just his experience instead of the you made me feel, because then that puts it back on your son. So it could just be your husband saying, I felt embarrassed, maybe. I don't know, but I'm just going to go with that one. I felt embarrassed, so I needed to take a minute to myself. But you're right, I did get stung by the bee, and this is what it looks like now. And, just kind of bringing some closure to that.
Yeah. So would it be appropriate then to say, like, if you notice someone is already feeling sad or embarrassed or hurt, that's a time where maybe the only comment we make is to say, I'm sorry, or to not make a comment then, and we'll give it time. Would that be appropriate to tell your child?
How do you mean? I don't think I follow your question fully.
So
like in this scenario, instead of me saying like, you shouldn't have done that because this is the reason, and it's like a really complex thing. Instead, we just say, well, could you see that daddy was not feeling very happy? Or could you see he was having some trouble? He was having a big feeling. When we see other people having big feelings, that's a good sign that we keep our words to ourselves.
Yes, I think you could do that. I think you could also frame it as a question. How do you think your dad felt then? And start the dialogue. But again, that would be better if your husband's willing to come back around and kind of validate or whatever that might look like. And something else flew out of my head. What I was gonna say. So I don't know. I would encourage not to force manners, and that was actually one of my next thing. Because telling a child to say I'm sorry, yes, they can repeat the words, but the meaning isn't there. And personally, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to be on the receiving end of I'm sorry. Like, I want you to actually feel it. So no, saying this, what I was going to say is coming back. So what we try to do in my family is what we call a check-in. So for example, my daughter splashed water on a friend, and the friend did not want to get wet. So they were very upset about that. And my daughter didn't care. She was having fun and whatever, and being present in her moment, didn't even notice, not a big deal. And so then I said, I don't think your friend wanted to get splashed. Like, can you see that she's feeling something? What do you think she's feeling? And then just the awareness, there was no comment. And I was like, okay, do you want to check in with her? No. It's like, okay. That was a tough one for me, because usually I get a yes and it's a check-in and it's easy. But this one was like, okay, what am I going to do now? So then I was like, all right, would you like help with that? Because I am concerned and I want to check in with your friend, which I really did. And so my daughter said, yes, like that's fine. And so then I turned to the friend and I was like, it looks like you didn't want to get splashed with water. Are you okay? Or can we help you with something like drying off, whatever it might be? And the friend was okay with it and just said, no, I'm fine. Thank you. But don't splash me again. And so then I went back to my daughter and said, okay, like we can do that, right? You know, we're all in this together, and your friend didn't want to get splashed. So can we work together to make sure she stays dry and you can still keep playing and all is well? And just having that conversation helped lower things where the friend still felt seen and validated and their desires mattered. My daughter's desires mattered. And I tried not to force her to do something she didn't want, which that was the first time I've had to navigate that in that type of scenario. But bringing that back to your story and question is just maybe a check-in would feel better of, I noticed dad looked upset. Maybe we give him a few minutes and then go check in on him. Or maybe when he comes back out, we can check in with him. Something like that, where again, you're kind of bringing it full circle and then also offering dad the chance to speak for himself when he's regulated. Head spinning. Oh man. Okay. Oh, it's 8:01. All right. Then I will just pause there and I will say, y'all are amazing. Every parent in this room, every parent on Zoom, every parent who sees this later, y'all are absolutely amazing parents. And I know that some of the stuff we talked about today might have been triggering, it might be upsetting, but please know that you're not doing it wrong. You're not a bad parent. There is no such thing. It's just that you're doing your best, and all of us might have an opportunity to do better. And like Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. So that's just our mission right now, is if something resonated with you, go ahead and make the shifts to change and do better. So with that, thank you. I appreciate y'all for having me today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have more questions for you.
Absolutely.
Okay.